for Thursday, October 29th, 2020. This meeting is being recorded. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes.
Yes, being recorded. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 2012 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so by following the instructions at the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of all proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Before we do our roll call vote, pursuant to MGL 7C 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recording. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listings of agenda items are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. All right, with that, we'll do a roll call vote. Steve Bannon?
A roll call.
Roll call. I'm sorry. Yes, we'll just do a roll call. We're not voting on anything. Steve Bannon. Let's see. You're muted, Steve.
Here.
Let's see. Ed Abrams.
Here.
Lee Davis.
Here.
Bill Cook.
Here.
Kate Burke.
Couldn't make it. It's her husband's 40th birthday.
Oh,
That's right.
happy birthday. Okay, great. Planning board members. Jeremy Ega.
Here.
Jonathan Henkin.
Present.
Malcolm Fick.
Here.
Pedro Pachano.
Present.
Garfield Reed.
Here.
Brandy Nelson. Here. I guess with that then, we'll call, we've done our roll call. We've called the meeting to order. And the first item on our agenda for our joint planning board select board meeting is presentation by BRPC of the housing needs study and discussion of that study. And I believe we have a representative from BRPC here this evening.
Yep. Philip is on the screen.
Hi, Philip.
Hey,
Thank you for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So everyone should have received the housing needs study. I don't know to what extent you've had an opportunity to review the content. But Philip, we appreciate if you can provide us a summary or if you've got other materials to share on screen. We're eager to understand what you guys have done as far as analysis.
Sure. I don't have any additional materials. I plan to just do a quick overview of the work that's been done so far and just briefly talk about some remaining steps that we have to finish this project off. So I'll just get right into it. Again, my name is Phil Arnold. I'm a community planner for Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. Within that role, I have to wear a lot of hats, but a significant portion of my work has been leaning towards housing-related issues just because of all the challenges that are faced all throughout the county. Before I get any further into this, I just want to make a note that the document that you all have is still in a draft format. There are a couple things that have to be tightened up, so I just want to make a note of that before I get into it. And with that said, so what is a housing needs assessment? In short, this is a document which is following a loose outline which is provided by the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. And the goal is to identify gaps or needs as an initial step in a planning process to address these issues. So the product that we're creating for Great Barrington goes a step beyond that, as there are more topics covered than outlined by MHP, excuse me. And it includes also some strategies and recommendations for further action. And hopefully soon there's going to be some input in there from the community. Chris is taking the lead on conducting some stakeholder interviews. The idea is just to get more of a complete picture of housing in Great Barrington rather than just what the hard numbers tell us. So the document that you have, there's a lot of granularity in it just because it's largely a data-driven report. And I think it's important not to get too bogged down in some of those details and rather the big picture ideas and the key issues that information shows. So overall, I want to say the big picture is that housing is limited, and it's limited in a lot of ways. So it's limited for renters, for example, due to a lack of housing stock, and availability tends to be limited, and where it is tends to be expensive or even seasonal. So for somebody who might be interested in, for example, renting a place for several years, there's just very limited housing out there. It's limited for prospective buyers because the majority of the stock tends to be older, tends to be very large, single family, and again, very expensive. So there's not a ton of diversity that we've seen. And to give that a little bit of context, just as it relates to income, about a third of homeowners are cost burdened, 43% of renters are cost burdened, and almost half of seniors are cost burdened. And just to give a quick overview on that, we're using, to define cost burden, it's essentially 30% or more of your household income is going towards housing costs. And what we've found through doing this report is that for many, that number is far, far greater than the 30% threshold. Some other key things that we've noticed is that even considering the decline in population and a small increase actually in housing production, that should equate to more availability. But we found that it still really hasn't, because the bottom line is that income levels have not increased nearly as much as it costs to buy or rent. And given the current climate with coronavirus, this has only been exacerbated. There's a lot of people trying to relocate, and the prices are just further inflated than they otherwise were. So that's kind of the big picture of the report. There's a ton of data in there. Again, I don't know how much time you all have had to comb through it, but it's a lot to digest. But that's the big overview, and then from that, we're trying to make some recommendations about how to proceed. But again, a housing needs assessment is an initial step. We've identified some problems, and we're trying to make some headway towards correcting them.
Brandy and Steve and members of the boards, this is Chris. I hope that we can, have a discussion on the study itself. And if you see anything missing, if there's some questions that aren't yet answered or answers that are unclear, it'd be good to discuss those, and we can set a course for wrapping up this needs study over the next month or so. And the section 10 is the kind of recommendation section, a quick summary of the report, and then some considerations for moving forward. So I thought if we could discuss the report and then some of the implementation recommendations, that might be a good way to shape our discussion.
Sure. I guess what I'd like to do, just because it's a hard format for us to all jump in and make comments on, can I just maybe go around the group and see if anyone has any questions for Phil that he can answer, kind of, I guess, in fairly direct terms, or maybe it's something you have to get back to us on, Phil. So, Steve, did you have any comments or questions?
I do not right now. Thank you.
Okay. Ed, how about for you?
One statistic, which is the median home price, seemed awfully high.
Yeah.
725.
Is that the list price, Ed?
What does it say? The
list price is far higher than that, actually.
Yeah. Listed home price is 725. The average listed home price 798.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just saying that's correct.
That's not correct.
Oh,
There's a lot of skewed information in there. For instance, this is going back to 2018. I don't know when your data was from, Phil. But there in the document, it shows 18 units on Bridge Street for $925,000, which is phase 2 of a condo development that will likely never get built. So that's a huge skew there.
And one thing about the listing, this is table 4.2, and it does say as of April 2018, there were 118 homes listed. I mean, these boards have heard and seen reports from the Berkshire Board of Realtors for the South Berkshire market and the Great Barrington market that the current inventory is actually much less than that. I think right now, single family homes in GB, there's like 45 listed, something like that, active or under contract. So the supply is even more contracted. I think this was probably an accurate representation of what was being listed back. March 2020, it was table 4.2. This was an accurate representation. So if that's the inventory on offer at that price, and that's it, that's a problem. It is skewed. I understand, Jonathan, some of those might not get built or might not get built anytime soon. But it's a picture of the market as it exists, nonetheless.
So I want to go back to Ed, just because, Ed, did you have more in the way of comment outside of that?
I guess no, you were just watching my eyes pop out and my jaw drop down.
Yeah, I had the same reaction. Bill, how about for you? Oh, you're muted, Bill. We can't hear.
Sorry. Not really a question about this, but in section 10, the implementation, develop a municipal affordable housing plan. And I wondered how we can just use this to create that, or is that a separate thing? Maybe Chris knows the answer to that. I don't know.
Where are you?
So that's sort of what I was getting at before, that a basic housing needs assessment typically doesn't have these kind of recommendations. It's solely a data-driven document, and we wanted to take it a step further than that. So this could be used to develop something like that. A formal, what's called housing production plan, HPP, is essentially what we're doing here, but it has to follow guidelines set by DHCD, and then ultimately it needs to be approved by them. So that's really the only difference, is that this is a document that, is within your authority to approve, whereas the housing production plan has to go through DHCD.
Bill, this is Chris. One thing I'll note is that from pages 53 to 56, we've incorporated there, after a quick discussion of a quick summary of the report and some bullets, we thought it was useful to put the master plan housing related recommendations in here for you to see. Some of them we've accomplished. Some we may not need to do anymore. Some may need to be revisited. So a housing production plan, maybe we need to go forward. So anyway, I encourage you all to look at those pages, Housing Goal 1, Housing Goal 2, Housing Goal 3. They may or may not be appropriate anymore, or we may need to shift our focus based on what this data is telling us.
Yeah, can I jump in on that, Chris? Because as I was reading it, a lot of those goals have been accomplished or at least partially addressed. And I think you're basically reprinting a document that's 7 years old and pretending that it's new. So I would much prefer to, it's fine to have the goals in there, but I think we need a note on each one, whether it's been addressed or not.
Oh, that's a good idea.
It's like a status, Jonathan. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Brandon, you do have one hand raised.
Oh, I cannot see hand raise. Let's see.
It's Eileen.
Eileen, allowed to talk. I didn't realize I had that power. Cool.
I gave you that power.
Okay, cool. We're much, we use a simpler format. So Eileen, I have addressed, you are allowed to address the group, but you need to unmute yourself, I believe. Eileen, you're still muted. Are you able to unmute yourself?
The phone number ending with 100. Oh, you got it. Okay.
I just did it.
Okay. All right. It takes 2 or 3 times. No, I raised my hand by mistake. Sorry.
Great. Okay, good.
That was excellent.
Jonathan, did you have anything else?
Well, I have a lot of sort of comments throughout the document, but
If you have, yeah, if you,
it's in the format to do it.
so the planning board discussion we had last week was if we had sort of specific things, we were going to send those to Chris. I'm sort of thinking, do we have more high level comments or questions for Phil at this point?
Well, what they make, it does make reference to market rent. And how do you determine market rent?
Can you tell me what page you're looking at, please?
Oh, sorry. This was in the, it was on the bottom of page 55. The last strategy. Since rentals are in such demand, they never go through realtors. So there's no, I have no idea what market rent is for anything.
That portion was actually taken from the comprehensive plan.
Right.
What we've done for the scope of this report regarding median rent is just how it's calculated by the Census Bureau, if that helps.
Where did
Typically,
the information?
sorry, this is Chris. Typically, either the Census Bureau and/or Department of HUD, for subsidized housing purposes and Section 8 purposes, they will publish a fair market rent after doing statistical surveys of the area. I think in this case, the area would be Berkshire County, less Pittsfield. Pittsfield would be kind of a donut. So I think their fair market rent for Berkshire County would guide that particular strategy.
And
That's a
obviously rents in North Adams have nothing to do with rents in
yeah. Obviously, we'd have to check and make sure that's legitimate, but typically it's based off of a standard like that. I don't know what it happens to be right now.
Pedro, did you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I wanted to add a comment to Bill that if you're interested in looking at what a production plan or something like that looks like, that Nantucket has a good one. I can share that info with you if you'd like.
Sure, that'd be great.
About our survey, the one thing I was looking for and the one really thing I was excited to find was info on short-term rentals. So I realize that it addresses the deficiency in short-term rentals, but I'm obsessed with this seasonal housing conversation and statistics that they gave in here. And I wonder, and this is a question, if we can really glean anything from the statistics that we have for seasonal rentals, in particular, the fact that there is a low demand for seasonal rentals for employment purposes, meaning that it seems like the rest of the county has an abundance of rentals available to people who come up and work in the spring, summer, and the fall up here, but in Gray Barrington, that's not the case. So, but we still have, 90% of all the rental units in town, which is 160 units, are homes that are available for rent of a total of 178 total short-term rentals. Something like that. So my point being, can we glean any information from the seasonal housing stats that we have regarding the amount of short-term rentals that are available? Because it seems to me that there is maybe it's an anecdotal relationship, but it seems like there might be a relationship there, because aren't Airbnbs and other short-term rentals, at least, I don't want to say majority, but a large portion of them aren't they seasonal rentals?
Yes, that's a good question, and I don't think that it's anecdotal. It's just data on short-term rentals is very difficult to come across, unfortunately. Tracked through the census, it's based on vacancy rates, and there's all sorts of things that can skew that number. Data that's readily available online through free databases tend to not be that accurate. The most notable one goes by zip code, so it may not even be specific to a municipality. So again, you get inaccurate numbers. And I'm looking back on page 52. That's why a very important recommendation is just to have a better system to actually track what is happening specifically in Great Barrington, not by zip code or by county. So it's just having a better means of tracking this. So we're pretty limited in what we have. If you have anything on short-term rentals that was not covered in this report, I'm all ears, because, as I said, it's hard to get good data regarding that.
Right. So I just would like to clarify the numbers that I read in here. So we have 950 total rental units in town. Of those, 178 of them are short-term rentals. So that's 18% of the total rentals available. And of those 178, 160 of those are homes. So not rooms or apartments. And so I don't know, for us, for both planning and select board, I think there is some indication at least about how many we have in town.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons we asked for the housing needs study, right? Was to try and get a handle on short-term rentals and what kind of impact it's having on housing stock in general. And I guess, we had tried to do our own diligence before this and come up with these numbers. And I guess I feel, somewhat vindicated that Phil is also having a challenging time. Not that that's the good news, but it just is a difficult thing for us to get our hands on. And so we may want to think about revisiting that strategy of potentially registering seasonally occupied properties. Because I think they come into several different categories. There are people that are buying homes and only making them available seasonally, but I know a lot of people who move out of their home for the summer season and let someone else occupy it. And so it's, a couple of different scenarios that may be hard to capture through the online databases. But good question, Pedro.
But in the end, that's 160 units that could come onto the market as
maybe, right?
Full-time rentals, right? I mean, I'm just saying.
Right,
I mean,
right.
and it makes that point in the survey. All right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Malcolm, anything for you?
Yeah, I too was hoping that BRPC had a magic source of data that the rest of us mere mortals didn't have access to. But on page 17, on the vacancies, I was struck by the number 410 for seasonal, recreational, and occasional use. How do you come up with that number, and what is it?
Sorry, just give me one moment. I'm just going back to page 17.
Is that second homeowners?
Yeah, but how do you know that they're seasonal or recreational if they're vacant?
Because their tax bill doesn't go to the Great Barrington address.
This data is it's a census data point, and there's a census definition, right, Phil?
There's definitely a definition on how the census defines. I'm just trying to find that.
We also talk about seasonal housing on page 47, 40, 47. I'm sorry. I'm losing it. I'm losing it now too. Seasonal, the census definition is these are units that, quote, are not intended for year-round occupancy, end quote. I don't know exactly what that means. Some of these may be things that are unheated camps in the middle of the woods, or mobile homes in the middle. Some of them may in fact be real housing units that are second homes. There's probably some overlap, and the census doesn't necessarily track that.
I can understand that if they're occupied. I'm just curious as to how they're seasonal if they're vacant. I mean, Jonathan was offered about the taxes, which answers probably most of it, but just curious as to what makes it vacant, what makes it seasonal or recreational if it's vacant.
I can look into that and try to see if I can have a better answer for how the Census Bureau tracks that. For the scope of this, like we just put in how they define it, which I did find here is page 36. Seasonal housing units are those intended for occupation only during certain seasons of the year and are found primarily in resort areas. Housing units held for occupancy by migratory labor employed in a farm working during the crop season are tabulated as seasonal. As the first quarter 1986 vacant seasonal mobile homes are being counted as part of the seasonal housing inventory. So again, some of the data can be skewed from the Census Bureau. This is, they're not considering Great Barrington, they're looking at the country as a whole. So they have broad definitions and have to count for every municipality. But I can look into how they're actually tracking that, and we can have another note of that in the report. You'll see that periodically, these little kind of call out boxes that we wanted to highlight some of the issues that that seem to be a little bit confusing. So it would be good to have a little bit more clarity on that. Thank you.
Theoretically, Jonathan, just let me jump in. Theoretically, people should be responding to the census for each and every home they own. So if they live in Florida most of the year, they are counted there. Although if they own a seasonal home or a second home in the Berkshires, they should register it with the census by filling it out and saying, for example, they may be saying it is only available for part of the year. And so it may get counted as vacant seasonal in that way, I think. Maybe Phil, you can check that. I know when we did the master plan, and we can look into this easily again, I think we counted 300 or so second homes, and that was based on, as Jonathan suggested, that was based on real estate tax data versus personal property tax data. How many personal property tax bills went out because the domicile for those people was elsewhere.
Right.
So that's how we tracked it at the time. And we can run that list through the assessors again and see. And maybe that non-domicile personal property list is what was it, 400 and some seasonal units. We'll check that out.
Okay. I mean, I didn't mean to make a big deal of it, but I was just thinking that maybe there were some hidden numbers in here as far as short-term rentals too with that 410.
Yeah.
Because I was looking through this document again for data on short-term rentals, as Pedro also stated, and I was disappointed to find that there wasn't more data available. And I really like this report. I think it's pretty damn comprehensive, and it does include a lot of data for us to digest. And I've gone through it once, and there's still a lot more to look at here. Thank you.
Thanks,
Also, Phil, there was a reference somewhere in there citing 46 or 48 mobile homes in Great Barrington. Where are they hiding?
Chris pointed that out. We had the same conversation. Yeah, that's another number that's likely is inaccurate, and it's just based off of the 2018 American Community Survey. but that's, I did double check it, and that's the number that the Census Bureau is estimating. And I think that's probably a key word, is that it's an estimate. And the American Community Survey tends to have, it covers a lot more topics than a decennial census would, but with that comes a lower degree of accuracy and a much higher margin of error. So that's the short answer, is that I don't think there's 40 some odd local. I think you're right.
Not if they read our bylaws.
So I wanted to see if Lee had any comments or questions.
Yeah, I did. Let me just get my notes. So I was looking at section 5, the senior housing. And I'm particularly interested in what they term the forgotten middle, which are seniors that don't have enough money to pay for out-of-pocket housing expenses, but don't qualify for Medicaid or low-income senior housing. So I was hoping to see a bit more data about this in here. I see the numbers, but I was just wondering if we could dive deeper into that, because I think that there's a big issue in Great Barrington about that, and there's a lack of support for that forgotten middle, the seniors that don't, they're struggling to pay for out-of-pocket expenses, but don't qualify for low-income housing. So I was hoping someone could speak about that. Or Phil, is that something that you were planning on going in deeper? I see the numbers, but it just doesn't really speak too much to me. Section 5.
Yes, yeah, I'm looking at it now. We can definitely dive farther into it. It seems that we've expanded a lot of these sections further than this one. I mean, the scope of this report, this is 3 pages, and the other ones tend to be a lot more comprehensive. So I think that is a good point.
And especially with, our demographics, we have aging demographics. We have a lot of people that have, a fear of are we going to be as a town able to support them? And I just think that that's something that we really need to focus on in Great Barrington. I'd like to see how this flushed out a bit more. So the other comment I have is I am very concerned about the lack of affordable rentals. So I'm just echoing what everyone else said, but I'd like to see if there's a way to get some case studies to see what other towns have done in terms of regulation or guidance, because I've had several people send me things saying, well, in this town they do this, in this town they do that. So I'd love to see if there's a way to have some kind of case studies, and maybe that's something that we need to do as board and committee members. But if there's a way to include case studies in your recommendations, or even links to say, well, these towns tried this. I believe in the master plan we had some references to other towns. I might be not right.
And Lee Pedro has done quite a lot, and actually I think he and Jonathan and probably Bill also have done quite a lot of research. We do have on our agenda a little bit further down a discussion about a potential affordable housing. I think we could call it an overlay, right, Pedro? Something like that. So we'll circle back on that. But your point is very well taken.
But you're also talking about short-term rental.
Exactly. I'm extremely interested in diving into short-term rentals.
What other towns have done on that?
Yeah, exactly. So have they have regulations on you have to have a minimum of 2 weeks, or I know we've gone over this several times, but there's other creative examples I've seen. So I would love to get on board with looking further into that, please.
If I may just break in for a moment, Garfield, I want to piggyback on what Lee said, and I'm not even sure if I'm broaching the right subject or it's the right time, but I think I myself had looked into possibly having some reductions on my taxes or whatever, but the amount of money they wanted to make was like $20,000, which was so low that I couldn't qualify. And I'm saying I couldn't use the help, but that's a valid point that you make, and good to look at, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, sure. Garfield, did you have anything else? You were the next person who's on my screen to...
I did. I just wanted to also mention I thought that the pricing of the housing was astronomically high when I said that 725. And something also that sticks out in my mind, I think if I remember correctly, I don't have the report in front of me. I don't know what the heck happened to it. I had it and now it's gone. But I know that there were some wicked discrepancies in salaries, what the median salary was in this town. And you can almost see why it was very hard for some people to afford to live here because it's expensive. But that was pretty much it. Without it in front of me, that's what I have right at the moment. I do remember that sticking out. I'd have to look at it again. I'm sure I have something else to speak on, but I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy, anything for you?
Yeah, I was interested. So I read through part and skimmed the whole study, but I was interested in strategies that, successful strategies that other towns or cities in the Commonwealth have taken in their public outreach to kind of make the whole idea about housing more digestible to people. I think that's, for me at least, that's the thing that is going to hold the town back, is our ability, or at least in what we can do to try to get the public to a place where they're accepting of like some of these recommendations that are being made, because a lot of it sounds good, but as soon as it happens in someone's backyard, then all of a sudden it's like, this is the devil, and this is going to ruin the very fabric of our society and so forth. And so I was hoping maybe maybe that's outside of the scope of the study, and maybe we can look somewhere else from BRPC for that.
Yeah, I think we've talked as a planning board about strategies for improving education and outreach to try and sell that, but it probably needs a very broad townwide effort.
So that's what I was wondering about, if they've encountered either towns or cities in the Commonwealth that have been successful, or maybe even in the region that have been successful. I mean, the larger Northeast that have been successful in changing the public's view of housing in general.
And maybe we can look into that, Phil. It may be beyond the scope of the report, but it may be something that these boards want to do as a follow-up action. But on that topic, one town I remember, city of Salem, Mass, did an excellent video series on the need for housing in their town. I don't remember the name of it, but I'll try to find it and send it out.
Great, thank you. I was curious, Phil, if there's a way to go beyond the community survey information about structures that have been constructed since 2010. Because we have had several developments be approved and be constructed, several affordable units. Let's see, what are they? Is it Forest Row?
Yes.
And the one on Hillside.
Well, you'll see. I
Are
think
those captured somewhere else?
pages 48 and 49 capture some of that.
Okay. The summary table on page 16 just says 0 houses built since 2010.
Right.
There's the Burning Tree development.
Yeah, this is
we're
a
talking-
creature of the poor 2018 data.
That's what I figured. I just wondered if there's a way for us to asterisk that, and then
That's good. We should add a sidebar there, Phil.
maybe the building department could provide that data.
We tried to highlight it early on. It's on page 3. We added this small section. We just called it a preface, and it's a tough thing to do. We were trying to explain how the American Community Survey works and the potential discrepancies in numbers to provide, some context for some of the things that will seem off in the document. But it's a tricky thing to do because you don't really want to lead essentially saying there are things wrong with this. So it's a tough thing to do, and also from different data sources. You know, if we're comparing, for example, stuff from HUD compared to the Census Bureau, I mean, even between those programs, there are discrepancies. So we didn't want to, I don't know how to say it. We thought that there could be a way to like put in an asterisk, as you're saying, and essentially say this is what's wrong with this data point. But then, in a sense, it might discredit the entire document.
Also, you change the denominator in one table, then you've got to adjust every single percentage. So it gets a little wonky, but we'll figure out a way to deal with that.
Yeah, I just think, as this goes out to the public, or we use it to try and make policy off of, if it doesn't pass the smell test of there hasn't been any new housing since 2010, then everyone's going to look kind of foolish for not identifying the obvious. I also wondered, Phil, is there any way, and maybe it's already captured in here, we've had an ADU law in place for several years. Is there any way to distinguish between two-family homes and homes that may have an ADU? Sometimes that's an issue in discussions in the community, how much that ADU is being utilized as a vehicle for adding housing in the community.
We could track building permit data since the law was passed.
Yeah, we've only had, 5 or so.
I think it's a small number, but I think it'd be nice because it is something that, as Jeremy points out, creates some anxiety in the community when we talk about ADUs. And if we had some data on just how prevalent the usage of the ADU law is, might help inform people so that they could feel differently. Yeah, Lee.
Would it be appropriate to look into, I know it's a housing feasibility, but whether there's, homeless amongst our population? Because, you have kind of anecdotal, evidence, I guess, of people living, let's say in the, fields or woods or moving from couch to couch. And I'm just wondering if it's appropriate to try to track that just so we have a sense if it's increasing and where these people are going and the support that's available. And so it just seems like it might be another area we might want to look into since it relates to housing and lack of housing.
Thanks, Lee.
Yep.
That does make sense. And yeah, I believe that is also tracked through the ACS. So we should be able to find that pretty easily.
That would be great. All right, Phil, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And Chris, thank you for facilitating. We look forward to seeing a final document. Do you still want people to send written comments to you if we have any other items? Chris?
Oh, sure. Send them directly to me.
Okay.
Excellent. Will do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I was taking down notes as we were going, but I likely missed something. So everybody has Chris's contact, obviously, and then he and I can coordinate. And like I said, it's still a draft. That's why we wanted to have this meeting. And obviously, there's several things that need to be tightened up before we're going to call this a final housing needs assessment.
Great. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. I'm going to sign off.
Sure. Bye, Phil.
Take care. Thank you.
So the next
Brandy?
item, yeah.
Brent, before we move on, I noticed, and I didn't notice until just now, that there's no item on the agenda for the housing subcommittee. Give an update and discussion on that. Would it be out of order to give an update?
That is a good point. I think we intended to include that. And you guys had a meeting this past week, right? Or Monday?
That's right. Yeah, and there's several items in there relating to affordable housing. That would be nice to
sure.
air
Yeah,
out.
go ahead.
Just want to make sure it wouldn't be out of order since it's not on the agenda.
If you're going to just share an update, I think that's fine. I don't think we should engage in any discussion or decision making around it.
All right, so then I'll just go over a couple things that we've been talking about, but that we Well, one thing we've been talking about for a while is tax abatements for affordable housing, right? So I distributed a model that Provincetown uses for reducing the tax levy on lots that offer a unit of affordable housing, whether it's a room, whether it's a whole other, an entire unit. Quickly, just so that we have some background, the way they calculate it, which I think is a decent way of calculating, is that they take the tax due times the size of the affordable unit and divide that over the total square footage of the improvement on the lot. And so then the tax rate is based on that. That's how they do it. Now, a couple of things that I would suggest that we make there. Well, I'll continue just to kind of give some background on what they do in Provincetown. Go ahead, John, you got a question?
Does that mean they just basically take the land value out of the tax bill? It sounds like that's what you just did.
They take the tax due times the square footage of the units and divide that by the total square footage.
That's to calculate the abatement, not to calculate the tax bill.
That's right.
I think maybe we just want to stay pretty high level because we do have 6 more things on the agenda.
Some things are I'm not an expert at it, and I haven't vetted this or talked to anybody about this to think through it. But I think that Jeremy is correct that's the number that you get from that calculation would be the abatement due that you would then subtract from the total tax due. They mandate that the lease for the affordable unit be year-round. And the benefit that they list is, obviously it creates affordable units. It creates reasonable rents within a community, and it lowers the taxes of the homeowner. So I think it's a good thing to pursue. Now, the way that they pushed this through is kind of a long process. They had to have town meeting approve the abatement. Then both houses in Boston and the governor had to sign on. And then it would come back to the town for a final approval at town meeting. So just so that select board is aware of the process, and so that if we decide to move forward with this, it's a kind of a long process, and we should, think about that. A couple of things that I would recommend that we make different. Their abatement is for households earning 80% of AMI. I would increase that to 100%, just so we get maybe that part of that missing middle, quote unquote. They also allow you allowances for utilities, and I'm not sure that would be such a great idea, just to kind of simplify the whole thing. And then I would think about allowing for 6-month rentals, or in other words, long-term rentals, rather than having strict 1-year leases, that maybe we can have longer term leases. I think it's defined as more than 3 months. Bill, you can correct me on that. I know that you know that. So I would consider, shortening the terms, just because sometimes you get, transitional housing, right, would fall under that category. Somebody who's down on their luck, they lost their job and they just got a new job, and they can get into a unit for 6 months before they move on. So that would be, an incentive for them. So I think that's all I have. That income limits, rental limits. Okay, so last thing on this that we would need to focus on from an administrative point of view is obviously how do we enact it. They go through the town assessor, but the town assessor is going to have to get this affordability information in front of him when he's making these assessments. So somebody would have to produce this data. So data on income limits, because it changes, yearly, and also the rental limits that are associated with those rents. So in other words, to calculate what the 100% AMI means, and then what an affordable rent is for somebody making 100% AMI. Anybody have any questions on that before I move on to our next item that we were talking about?
Nope.
Okay, so the next interesting item we were talking about was about allowing the parcelization of lots that are non-conforming with deed restricted ADUs. And so the model that I was using for this proposal was a model in Nantucket where they do just that. So the idea would be that somebody who is in a zoning district who doesn't meet the requirements to subdivide their lot could create a separate lot that could be in separate ownership if that whatever improvement is done on that subdivision is deeded as an affordable unit. A few things that they do in Nantucket, which I think are good, which we might consider adopting here, is that subdivided lot would have to be at least 40% of what's required in the district. Okay, so like R3, it's 5,000 square feet. Is that right, John?
Yep.
So we would need 40% of that 5,000 square feet in order to create this subdivided lot. The density requirements would be the same as well. So setbacks, lot coverage, that sort of thing would need to be the same. Obviously, we would have to look and see how that works out for our districts.
Were you at the same town meeting